Ready,
Action.
yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first ever Health Chat. Hello, my name's Shane Tigell, I'm the Chief Executive of IMS-MAXIMS, and Kate Mila-Folcher. You're 100,000 welcomes, and you are most welcome. I had a bit of a hint, my mum was Irish, so she gave me a few lessons. You are incredibly welcome, and to all of our colleagues joining us on Periscope. Thank you for coming to our humble home here in Dublin. Unfortunately, we've had to put the blinds down, but at the end of the chat we might be able to lift them so you can see that we are rather blessed at being here in Dublin Bay. IMS was founded here in Dublin 31 years ago, and in 2017 we will support over 200 hospitals and 13 million live patient records, and over our time maybe 50% of Irish citizens will have benefited from one of the records produced by IMS, and in the UK probably 1 in 5. It is our great pleasure to welcome two guests today for the first Health Chat. IMS, one of our key principles is about sharing, transfer of great practice knowledge. And a couple of years ago I was fortunate and we were very privileged to get involved with Roy Lilly and the Fabulous Academy. And anybody who knows about their work knows that it's about sharing and transferring knowledge. So I'd like to welcome Roy to join us. And of course, our guest tonight, Richard Corbridge, a man who's spent his career working in all things health, tech and sharing, prolifically sharing. So I'd like to welcome the CIO of the Health Service Executive in Ireland and the CEO of eHealth Ireland to come up and start the evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, you don't need that.
I don't need this.
No.
Oh, okay.
Can someone, do you know who I am? I don't carry my own microphone. Hi everybody watching on Periscope. Before we get started, I've got to show you something, because you know that we've had a bit of a joke about socks at the Health Chat. So there we are. We've all come dressed. These are incredibly long socks. I've got them tucked into my pants. These are
anti-embolism socks.
They're de-embolism socks. Yeah, no, these are in aid of dementia, and so.
Can I tell them how you got yours?
And I'm not going to. I think the other one is in aid of dementia as well. I think so. Yeah. Go on, hurry up. Yes, go on.
When some people arrive in Ireland by plane at the airport, some people kiss the ground, some people get flowers, some people get cards. He got met by somebody wearing some pink socks.
Waving a pair of socks. Shane, thank you very much. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm sure you're all sitting there thinking, who the hell is this? Well, my name is Roy Lilly. We've got two latecomers. That's okay, come in. We're live. We won't embarrass you in front of probably 5,000 people by now, but that's fine. And it's clever. They arrived together and they've split up. So there's something going on there. I'm not one to gossip, but that's all right. That's it. You walk in front of the camera, that's fine. Do you have television here? Do you know how this works? I don't know, really. Anyway. Yeah, my name is Roy Lilly. I used to be the chairman of a health authority, and I used to be the chairman of a trust. And I used to be the leader of my council. I used to be the mayor of where I lived. I think I was one of the youngest people ever to run a public company. Used to be a policy advisor. I used to be in academia at Imperial College. So you can see I'm the sort of professional has-been that they fly over to do this kind of thing because I'm cheap. So much so, I was at a conference the other day and a woman came up to me and she said, "Are you here for the health conference?" I said, "I am." She said, "I thought I recognised you. Didn't you used to be somebody?" Which is a great sign. There's two more people arriving late. Do you not have wristwatches? How does it work? I don't know. That's fine. No, that's okay. He says makes all the difference. Anyway, listen, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me. Let me explain. I'm from something called the Academy of Fabulous Stuff, and our mission is to share best practice. We get something like, 40 new ideas a day being sent to us. We have 2,000 page views on the website. We've had over 3 million in 3 years. We're very proud of it. I'm just back from Toronto, where I've been speaking about the work of the Academy of Fabulous Stuff. And our mission is to share best practice, show people what good looks like, and we figure that they'll get on and they do it, and they usually do it better. And also, as part of our mission, we have a whole series called Health Chats, which are sponsored and supported by fabulous IMS-MAXIMS, who help us present these in England and throughout the UK. It's the first time we've been in Ireland for a health chat. The idea of a health chat is it brings well-known people in the health field, in the health landscape, closer to the people that they work with, show them what they're really like as a person, what their mission is, and what they see their work is in the future. So it's my great pleasure to welcome probably one of the key people in management of healthcare in Ireland. Would you please welcome Richard Corbridge? Well, I mean, it's always difficult to know where to start with this kind of thing. So anyway, show your socks. That's fine. So we'll show I'll show you our socks. But I mean, you're actually a Yorkshire lad, aren't you? Right. What happened? Let's go back to the beginning.
So yeah, born and bred in Barnsley.
Barnsley.
So just
where the Barnsley chop comes from.
Barnsley chop.
Yeah. When did you last have a Barnsley chop?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of
Has anybody eaten a Barnsley chop? It's an enormous meal, isn't it? Yeah. It's impossible really for one person to eat a Barnsley chop. Anyway, so you brought up on Barnsley chop.
Yep.
When I was so poor, we had one shoe for our whole family.
You don't do a good Barnsley.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So where Barnsley? Yeah.
Yeah. So brought up in Barnsley, went to uni, did business studies.
Where did you do uni? Where did you go uni?
So I went to Worcester.
Worcester.
Did business studies.
Is that a uni or is it an ex-poly? Yeah, it's not a proper university. It's not Imperial College, darling.
You can tell.
You know what I mean. Yeah. Until I know, we need to know what kind of a degree you had. You know, don't tell me you went to a poly and got a Desmond.
No, but
you'll know what
business
Desmond is.
studies.
Desmond is a 2-2. Yeah, you don't know. What did you get?
A first, business studies.
A first.
Education.
Yeah. And negotiation.
Education.
Oh, education. Right. Good. Yeah, and a lot of good that's done you. Yes.
I'm educating.
Yeah. And what happened then?
So, got a job in the NHS, programming, supporting the systems that pay GPs, that do cancer score recall.
Which hospital was that?
Across the old IT function before the National Programme for IT, so the NHS Information Authority under Gwyn Thomas and Roger Bell and those people.
Yeah, Gwyn Thomas is a lovely man.
He's a brilliant superstar.
Still around, is he still around?
Yeah, he's done some work with us in London.
Yes. No, he's a very gentle man. He comes from almost another era. And I don't mean that unkindly or rudely. He's just a very nice man.
Very, very fun.
Yes. And then Richard, of course.
Yes, so I did work in the National Programme for IT, moved from, that was in Birmingham actually, moved from Birmingham up to Leeds.
Now this is difficult really because put your hand up if you're familiar with the National Programme for IT in England. Oh, okay, fine. So, I mean, it's interesting this, isn't it? I mean, it was a job as big as Brunel, really, wasn't it, in terms of engineering? You know, lifting up the health service, putting in the infrastructure, whilst the health service kept going. And I think Richard did it rather well, but of course he lost a few friends on the way.
Yeah, there was a very specific skill that the original people in the National Programme were there for, which was to procure and manage vendors as bloody tightly as you possibly can. And I think, like you say, friends were lost on the way. A lot was achieved. The media would often not portray that a lot was achieved. But if you look at the NHS now and compare it to other jurisdictions, there are things the National Programme put in place that still change and deliver for patients every day.
I think that's right, and there's a lot to be learned. Well, let me put it that way. What did you learn from the National Programme? Now you're the Richard Granger, aren't you? Really?
Not the Richard Granger.
But I mean, in the sense it's the same type of role. I mean, what did you learn from that?
I think one of the biggest things that we've tried to do.
Can I just say I learned he wasn't tough enough.
Wow, because he was very tough.
Yeah.
I think the clinical engagement, listening to clinicians, putting clinicians at the centre of what we're doing, was something that the National Programme missed for many, many years before it started to do that. Right from the beginning in Ireland, we had the Chief Clinical Information Officer's concept. We've driven that really hard, and there are a few other CCIOs in the audience today, and Michael from IMS has been part of that group from its inception as well. So we've involved suppliers, tried to create partnerships rather than that vendor relationship, and really pushed hard to keep that clinical focus, that patient focus in everything we do. We don't have any projects that are led by clinicians.
Looking back on it, it seems such an obvious thing to do, didn't it? That engagement thing. Why do you think that we didn't do that engagement thing?
Clinicians drive IT people hard and a little bit bananas. And that's, the sum total of it. IT people can often think they know the answer, but actually we need customers, we need the users to tell us what the answer is sometimes. And I think we shirked our responsibility sometimes to do that, because it was easier to say this is how IT works, so change your clinical practice, than it was to say how do clinicians want to use IT to make clinical practice more efficient or safer.
But I suppose it's probably true to say that we didn't have that capacity then with the National Programme for IT. I mean, we had some pretty brutal stuff, a lot of it from America that really was used for calculating payer systems. It wasn't really sensitive, was it?
I'm not sure I'd agree. When we look at what Ireland's done in the last couple of years,
No, I mean
when you look at some of the systems that the UK bought under the National Programme for IT, with clinical input to those systems, they can, and in Ireland have been made to be systems that are usable by clinicians, whether it's MAXIMS, whether it's other organisations, by bringing clinicians in from the beginning and taking time with clinicians to make the system right. We've seen positivity in Ireland from that, and I think that's something we didn't do in the early days of the national programme. We thought IT was the answer, and we thought taking money and coming back in a few years' time with an answer would be acceptable, and it never was.
But is there a sense that clinicians now are more eager to embrace management of information by the use of information technology and systems and so on? I mean, it always amazes me how we buy our holidays online, we do our banking online. What could be more intimate and personal than how much you've got in the bank? Almost everything we do now online. But when we come to work, I don't know what it's like here, but when we come to work, it's like looking back in the 60s, really. I just look for the flared trousers, and, the Triumph Toledo car. We put up with a lot of infrastructure that I don't know why we do it. I mean, we should be demanding.
I think two things are different in Ireland, though, Roy. Firstly, the trend around the commercialisation of IT, pretty much what you're talking about. Clinicians have got a more powerful piece of IT in their pocket than the stuff we're delivering to them. And that's, people have become more and more used to IT being part of their lives day in, day out. The other thing in Ireland that I noticed very, very quickly is our starting point isn't where the national programme was. When the national programme started, we were asking clinicians to stop using something they had been using and move to something else. In Ireland, that's something they have been using is predominantly pen and paper. So we're saying, stop using pen and paper because that's not efficient or safe, and start using IT from this decade, because clearly that is going to be safer and more efficient and clinically derived and clinically built. And that's why I think Ireland has done the job it's done in the last 2 years, and the years it's shortened in the gap between the NHS and what the Irish healthcare system has.
Just let's go back a bit. So you're working for the National Programme for IT in England. What you did another job then you came here, did you?
Yeah, so I worked for the National Institute for Health Research, so I was the CIO for clinical research wherever it happens in the NHS, looking after...
Does that still exist?
It does indeed, it's an amazing organisation.
Better find out about that. Yeah.
So it's a £1 billion investment into clinical research in the NHS. Most clinical research in the UK is done inside the NHS. It's a way of making the NHS cheaper because organisations pay for patients to be in trials. It's a way of bringing industry into the UK and doing that work. It's a phenomenal organisation.
And you arrived here in 2015?
Yeah, 14, so December 14.
Yeah. And okay, what happened?
Well, it's been one hell of a journey. 2.5 years later, CIO from day one, going into Dr. Stevens in the middle of Dublin and finding out where we're at and what we're trying to do, building a team, changing the team completely from its structure. We had a team that was very much geographically organised, so often repeating functions in some ways. So we've now become a single national team, things like a single national help desk, a single national PMO, and ability to run projects and programs. But 288 staff, that's it. So IT for the whole of the Irish health.
288 staff.
So there are 109,000 people working in health, and 288 of those do IT. So
enormous staff.
It's definitely not enormous.
Oh, a lot of cuts coming. Saving money.
They're a phenomenal team.
Okay, 288 staff. Okay, what are their names?
That would be a long hour.
We'll see. And I understand you've got a business plan which is now out of date, is that right?
Yeah, so we have a business case with the electronic health record, which was approved by the HSE, the Chief Clinical Information Officers, and the eHealth Ireland Committee around 12 months ago. It's with the Department and the Minister's team to start to understand how and what that means and where that goes.
Because we all want to know is when are you going to get the money?
We all do want to know when we're going to get the money. You're quite right, Roy. I think we had some good news in the last couple of weeks. A cross-party report called Saunter Care has published. There are 49 mentions of e-health in that report, and it mentions the amount of money that the business case asks for, and it mentions the
Brilliant. How much is it? Just under £1 billion, isn't it? Yeah. Which is a big chunk of money for a relatively, I'm not being rude, don't misunderstand me, but a relatively small.
So it's €17 per person per year.
Really? Well, you can go out and knock on the doors and get it. Because no, it's not. No, but you know what I mean. It is a big chunk of money. Do you have to spend it in one go, or is it a phase?
No, so the business case suggests that I wouldn't do, learning again from a national programme, wouldn't do single supplier, one go, one solution fits all. It has 4 parts of the business case for acute care, for community, to provide integration across the whole piece, and then to create a summary care record, a shared care record.
Yeah. A summary care record, yeah. So what are you going to, how's it phased? What are you going to do?
We actually started the integration capability of the summary care record already. The team is now mobilised for the procurement of the EHS.
Are you going to do the summary care record across the whole piece, or just in A&E, or how are you going to do it?
So unlike the NHS, the HSE is responsible for health and social care across the whole land, which gives us a massive opportunity because we're able to link those whole things together and pull them into one place.
That is a huge advantage, isn't it? Starting with health and social care.
Yeah.
And is that the same budget as well?
Yes, so that's all within that just under £1 billion budget to create that. Yeah. What we've found and been able to...
And does that give you access to social care records as well?
Where they exist now, predominantly in Ireland, social care information will be on paper. And that's the big challenge, that's the big difference. When we talk about data security, when we talk about open data in Ireland, we talk about how do you secure paper predominantly. And that's been, we had our first maternity hospital, our first digital hospital go live in December of last year. That's the first time Ireland has a truly digital hospital. We have A&E through IMS-MAXIMS in various places now, really starting to ramp up that digital pathway of how we deliver. But we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. And the maternity one's interesting. I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but women hold their maternity records themselves, don't they?
In the UK,
yeah. Does that?
So
is that the same here?
One of the shared care record pieces that we will do this year is the mother will be able to access their own record digitally at any point in time, rather than carrying that mythical big fat red book.
The red book, yeah. I think there's a bit of software already, isn't it, called the red book? I think it's an app.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So you're going to reinvent the wheel, or you're going to use that?
So the data that's there, we're looking at how we get the integration to that. One of the things you've always got to be careful of is the different laws and rules around accessing data and the security of that. So
well, I mean, that's an interesting point, isn't it? I mean, what is the appetite? We've just seen, I don't know how keen you are NHS England watchers, but we've just come unstuck with Google DeepMind, where a hospital has shared some records. I think really in the spirit of trying to do things better, not for any mysterious reason, they just want to do things better. And clearly the power of computing that DeepMind offers does give you a big public health edge if you can use it properly, but somehow or other it's fallen foul of the data protection laws because we haven't asked people whether or not we can transfer their data for that purpose. I don't know how it works here. Do you have the Data Protection Act the same?
No, the same situation, yeah.
I mean, as I interviewed Dame Fiona Caldicott, who is our data guardian, it seems to me to be a pretty toothless job. She doesn't have a lot of legal wallop behind her. And it's pretty clear, if you collect data, you can use data for the purpose for which it is collected. And using that argument, I don't see what the argument is against what Google DeepMind has done.
I think that what we've tried to do in Ireland, learning from things like the issues there with Google, is make sure that we have a solution that's a single solution for patients to opt in and opt out. So as part of the individual health identifier, there will be later this year a portal where the people, the citizens of Ireland, can go and say, actually, I understand what it means, but I'm going to opt out of sharing my digital information for healthcare purposes. And the same, I'm going to opt out or opt in of sharing my information for clinical research purposes. So what we try to do is put that process back in the hands of the citizen. Also, the citizen will be able to say, see who has looked at their information. So you make that audit capability be in the citizen's hands rather than being mysteriously held by the NHS and requiring permissions to find out that Google has done X, Y, and Z. So we're pushing as much as we can into the public.
That's a great lesson to learn because care.data fell down really. The legislation actually didn't give an opt-out. The original Health and Social Care Act 2012, it just said we're going to capture your data and we're going to use it. It didn't give an opt-out. And then, of course, when it said it didn't give an opt-out, the politician said, oh, it hasn't given an opt-out. Well, it was their own fault to start with. Health Select Committee went potty, for no good reason, really. So that is a good lesson there, isn't it?
I think when you look at consent generally, and you compare different countries' approaches to consent, we were in Germany recently, we were talking about consent and clinicians using EHRs in a hospital in Berlin, and whether at first we assumed it was translation that was stopping the communication to move forward, but the CIO of the hospital was basically saying, when we tell patients we're going to share, and we tell clinicians to use the system, we don't need to engage, we don't need to give options, we just tell them.
Where was that?
In Berlin.
Berlin. What, so yours is an opt-out?
So for care, it will be opt-out for an electronic health record, not for the IHI, and for clinical research it will be opt-in.
And what about the social care?
Social care is part of the health record.
Yeah. And that's a fairly simple thing for people to do on a website?
It will be, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so then, so that's that bit. What's the next bit? The moving beyond the care record?
Yes, in the last couple of weeks we went live with the health identifier now being on electronic referrals. So last year we rolled out electronic referrals across the whole country.
So what was the issue then about the identifier? Because we've had the same issue. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you use, providing everyone uses the same thing.
I think our issues around the identifier were entirely around getting the right time to put it out there. We chose a number that matched the NHS format, so the NHS number format. We then learned that the NHS had some numbers that were associated to Ireland. To help with moving patients between the North and the Republic, we decided to use the ring fence numbers for the Republic. So if a patient goes from Ireland to the North or Ireland even to the UK, it could be a single identifier across jurisdictions. Now, there's a lot of work to do to sort out and make that both legally and technology-wise possible, but by landing on that as the answer, it's given us an opportunity to share information.
What's the legal issue?
Whether you can use the IHI across borders, so there's Irish legislation that needs to be considered and UK legislation about moving information and whether it can be done with or without active consent and the patient's view.
And that requires primary legislation or
Potentially.
regulation? Primary legislation?
Potentially.
Is there an appetite for that?
There is,
Yeah, here.
And in the North as well. Some of the colleagues from the room today, there's been a lot of conversations about
In Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can imagine there's a border there that people are moving across that border daily if they can.
Well, there's a big question mark about that, isn't there? What happens next? But it's, when you talk about Brexit and all the rest of it, you don't realise, do you, that there are little subtleties. I mean, people think it's just lorries going across with stuff. It's a lot more.
If you live on the borders, you could have a GP in the north and a hospital appointment in the south.
Yeah.
That's a regular daily occurrence.
Yeah. Okay, and the next bit, is that there were 4 bits? Have we done the 4 bits?
Yeah, so then the team mobilising for the procurement, we have a new National Children's Hospital being built in Dublin, and we need to have an electronic health record ready for that to open its doors in 2022, and that means that procurement has to be started by the end of this year to give us time to build, test, clinically engage, clinically build, and put that into that first
Are you
year.
taking legacy systems into the new build?
We don't want to take legacy systems into new build. We'll take current modern systems. We have a single radiology system across Ireland that's seen as appropriate to go into the new hospital, and various other, and a single lab system for that whole Ireland, and various others, but not legacy paths. There isn't a legacy EHR to take into that.
Yeah.
So the question with the National Children's Hospital becomes, is it a digital hospital or is it a paper hospital? And would we really consider opening a hospital in 22 that is a pay for a hospital at that. That's a big question that still actually genuinely still needs to be answered.
Well, you can't build a brand spanking new hospital with that bits of paper.
Home costs.
Well, you can't. You're bloody stupid. Everybody's listening, it's bloody stupid. Don't do it. It's interesting. I mean, I suppose the big issue for you is the money, isn't it? Where is it from? So what's the phasing? If you get the money, how much of it, how does it work? How does it phase it?
So it's a 6-year program of work to deliver an EHR that can be pulled down by hospitals, a community electronic health record that can be pulled down there, and then the other 2 pillars as well. So it's very much not not like a national program. Not give me some money and I'll see you in a few years. The phasing to be well worked through on how much is needed each year, the cost per patient, the cost per system, and that's, I think, the beauty of it is coming late to the EHR business. And what that means is we can learn those lessons and understand that actually there's no point to setting a big macro figure and assuming that's where we need to go.
I was listening to you answering, and then I was thinking, you know what? Sometimes it's not a good idea to be first in. You can learn a lot of the lessons, can't you?
You can, but there's also that innovation.
The truth is we're still struggling.
Yeah. And I think you've got to be careful as well, because while we're not first in, we've got a long way to go. The innovation piece, we've fostered a huge innovation piece in Ireland in the last couple of years to make sure that whilst we're not first in by any means for an EHR, we're the first country in the world to sequence the genome of epilepsy patients. We're the first country in the world to have a patient-based supply chain management for haemophilia patients right up to their home fridge with their treatment into the fridge. And a number of other really groundbreaking technologies. So we're trying to make sure that while we're waiting to understand how to be thinking about a full big EHR, the ability to do those smaller projects, those €1 million size projects, we can still do those as well.
You wouldn't, would you, I suppose, well, then we put this another way, I mean, we're only in the mess we're in because of what we've inherited, the legacy that the lodestone that we carry with all the bits of paper and the rest of it, which you must carry into your new hospital. What do you think, what do you make really of public attitudes to all this? Because in England, we probably handled it badly and paid the price for that. Carrying public opinion. I mean, it is crazy, isn't it? I mean, we trust our bank records, but our health records seem. I mean, I wonder really. Let me ask you: have you done any work with patients on what their attitudes are?
Yeah. So one of the things we decided to do around procuring an EHR was not do the big 300-page output-based specification, send it to the suppliers, and ask them to design us an IT system. We've created a number of personas. So fictional people of Ireland, patients, citizens, clinicians, administrators, managers, give them names, sexes, ages, things that are wrong with them, their specialist areas. And that becomes how we procure an EHR. So we deliver that to vendors, and instead of saying, what does your IT system look like? We're saying, what does your IT system do for people? But instead of doing that in a closed room, the guys building it, we run public workshops. The public are invited to come and work out what those personas should be. Things like we had an innovation week last year where we had 3,000 people come to a free public conference to look at what IT does for healthcare. Not in any shape, way or form selling any specific type of IT, but just to understand and start to build trust, love, I'm hoping, create fans of what we're trying to do. Because there's a big part for me now of we need the public to be saying the health system needs to be a more modern healthcare system. We can't secure paper. I think that the big problems around the risks around information being lost, stolen, moved, we never contemplate how easy it is for paper to be lost, stolen, or moved. And we spend decades worrying about digital information.
What about the press? What's the attitude? Because we had a very hostile press in England.
So on my 3rd day in Ireland, I got in a taxi, and the taxi driver asked me where I was working. So I said the HSE. Sucked his teeth and said in a very broad north side Dublin accent, "You're working for the 2nd most hated brand in Ireland, Irish Water and then the HSE." So there isn't a love in the press for the health system of Ireland. And recently with the cyber attacks and the WannaCry stuff, and has been able to protect our systems from that, we've seen a bounce where there's been more positivity about what we're doing. But I haven't come across any jurisdiction where the press love the healthcare system, and particularly the IT function of the healthcare system.
we're a very hostile press. The WannaCry thing was interesting because you didn't really protect your system, you just unplugged it.
We didn't unplug it. Everybody could use their system inside out. We plugged it.
Just pulled the plug, the bit of string that went to England.
It didn't go to England. No, that's not fair. We did protect the
I
system.
never said I'd be fair.
Because one of the things we did do was we made sure that inside the healthcare system, where IT was being used to treat patients.
Have you still got XP going?
Every healthcare system has XP going still.
Well, that is true, because I mean, quite a lot. XP is a developer platform, isn't it? So you've got a lot of stuff that runs on XP that you don't really know who runs on XP.
And there's a big part. It's not people. We're not talking people using computers that are XP. We're talking blood analyzers, or diagnostic machines, things that are going to cost you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of euros to replace. It's not as easy. We've got 1,000 XP machines. It's not as easy on Monday morning as go and get those replaced.
And it's not easy to download the patches either, is it? Because often you have got to take the system offline to do it.
And then test the clinical system. So if you've got a blood analyzer that you know is now at risk, you've got to test the blood analyzer with XP and all the patches.
And who hasn't downloaded a Microsoft patch and ended up with a blue screen of death? And then you ring them up and they say, oh, well, you've got to download a patch. Microsoft are useless, aren't they? They're almost unusable. You know, why do you still use it? Why do you use Linux or something? Free.
All sorts of operating systems are used throughout healthcare. It's used in those 1,000 cases because the vendors will be using that as their operating system. I mean, for us, in the work that we've been doing in recent times in the HSE, we're moving to a cloud-first solution, we're moving to Office 365, we're moving to a different way.
Don't go to Office 365. You just lose everything.
But including the
It's
needs
just
of
a valley of death.
I don't think so.
It lost all my holiday pictures. You can't trust it.
It's a national service.
It's a national service. Me and Peter Stringfellow on the beach. No, you don't. Please tell me you're not going to use it anymore. Sorry, if you're listening, Bill. Sorry. Anyway, there you are. Yeah, go over to Apple. It's much better. So, okay, so let's think about the public again, because that does interest me. Do you detect a different attitude to the public here than when you were working back in England, or have you just learned a lot and you're going to go down a different route with it?
Bit of both. There is a different attitude because people look at the healthcare system in Ireland and see the amount of paper that's driving the system, and we can see that when we talk about inefficiencies and things that need to change and the way we need to change, removing that paper is one of the routes that need to happen to do that. And I think that's where the public are now starting to see that we're not going to have an efficient healthcare system when we're using taxis to move records around the healthcare system.
I wonder, about interoperability. What do you? Is there any intent to be interoperable with Northern Ireland?
So with the IHI being shared across there are a number of projects in place to do that. Patients with cancer are receiving treatment in the north and live and have their GP in the Republic. So that has to be. There's no getting away from the fact that you actually start to talk about patient safety and real information-driven risk to patients and the ability to deliver clinical care if there isn't the ability to share information. It has to be built on patient safety. The resolution to whatever needs to be happening around information borders needs to happen for patient safety in Ireland.
In Northern Ireland, I mean, my guess is they'll be moving into a different configuration as well. I mean, at the moment, all the big fashion in England is accountable care organisations, and Northern Ireland is just made to become one big accountable care.
I think the big fashion everywhere is to look at accountable care as a way of moving forward there as well. It seems to be the way of trying to move not just the responsibility but the ownership just one step away from a big central monolith.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say to you, how does it, what you're doing now, sit with the reconfigurations that will undoubtedly come in the future, because organisations reconfigure, don't they?
One of the things that we've put at the centre to the EHR business case, our new structures that we've been putting in place, is to make sure that we're agnostic to the health system's own structures. The Slange Care report that I mentioned earlier, the cross-parts report, talks about new structures for the health system. And to be fair, since coming here in December 14, new structures for the health system have been talked about. So we've tried to make sure that whatever we put in place can bend and morph into and continue to support beauty of the HSE and Ireland in particular is that link to the health and social care system. Having worked in the NHS for 20 years, to see one organisation responsible for that breadth it gives us a massive leap forward.
I think it's a tremendous benefit, a tremendous advantage. So where do you go next to it? I mean, where do you see? I don't want to sort of ask the sort of the clunky question about what can go wrong, but I mean, where do you see the danger points with this? Because this is it's a big rollout. You've learned a lot of lessons in other people's rollouts, but I mean, where do the pinch points come from?
So we're 13 months into a business case. The biggest pinch point is deciding that we are going to do this financially, and I think
that's out of your hands.
It is, but it's at the moment we're starting to do it anyway without the money. We're starting to do the integration, create the summary care record, do these pieces without knowing that the next stage is actually affordable, and that comes with risks. Managing vendors, regardless of who the vendor is, regardless of the personas work and our direction, it is difficult. It's been proven everywhere.
Vendors are going to get pretty pissed off, aren't they, if they're strung along and they don't know that the money's coming.
And there's a big part of trying to make sure that whoever delivers, or a number of companies is delivering, that integration, interoperability you mentioned is there. Ireland's small enough to make sure that it is doable. We've created a function inside eHealth Ireland that is entirely focused on what we call access to information, making sure that wherever information moves around the system, it moves in a secure way, it moves in a data cleansed way and an identified way.
The extent to which we work with suppliers and providers and developers interests me, because in England we just pushed them too far. I think the contract requirements were sort of eye-wateringly tight, and perhaps I mean, I understand why Richard Granger did it, but on reflection, perhaps it didn't help. The whole of the vendor landscape really has had a very difficult time, isn't it, since 2010.
Yeah.
The whole business is sort of closed up really in many respects. Where do you see them sitting really in this? I mean, you've got the promise of what could be a really interesting development, something new, innovative coming on. They've heard all the promises before. I mean, how do you keep the vendors on the side or interested in you? I'd have walked a long time ago.
Most CIOs are now saying it's a partnership, not a vendor relationship.
Yeah.
Whether they actively really can mean that, it's difficult. We say it, we mean it. So vendors, partners are now part of the Chief Clinical Information Officers Council. They're part of the ecosystem. Where the contracts are in place, it is a partnership relationship to deliver the things that we're delivering. I think some of the other things we're trying to do in the last 12 months in particular is foster relationships with the new innovations and startups. The work we've done in that space has started to build relationships from the very embryonic beginnings of organisations. So we've worked closely with really new ideas that have come out of startup incubators and organisations that can deliver something different for health. Whether it's wristbands to monitor where people are going through surgery, whether it's solutions to prescribe an amount of fitness, or a secure WhatsApp for clinicians to actually use. These are Irish companies that we're supporting and building a relationship with, not a vendor organisation. So we're trying to create that big business partnership, but also trying to create that new startup partnership so that there's loyalty in there.
Yes, you've got, I mean, this is a big project, or it will be, won't it, over the time. Where's the talent coming from the health services point of view? Because it's not, in terms of IT talent, the NHS is not the first choice of often people who are very talented, work in a very competitive environment.
Yeah, I mean, I look at my team, I'm very proud of the team that we've got. They work so hard with such a small resource to deliver the things.
There's 288 of them, there's not. They were a small country.
We have a talent management program inside that to actually work with the staff that are already in the team to continue to develop the skills, the ability to work and move forward. In this calendar year, we've brought 50 new people into that team. You can imagine, you talk about the NHS and the competition there, imagine trying to recruit IT people into Dublin when you've got Google and Facebook and Twitter and it is difficult. But I think what we see is people who have a mission to do something different. It's not about making money from about delivering healthcare. We try to push that mission an awful lot so that, we've had young kids come in to work in the organisation now who really believe in what we're trying to do and can do that as an intern and start to see that the healthcare system is worthy of them working in there, even if they could go and work for Google and earn more ultimately on day one. There's an ability now to actually come and see the benefit of working in the HC in the health system.
Just think about the politics of this. I mean, the success of this will depend on the politics.
And the healthcare system in the world.
Oh yes, no, I'm not saying it's in any sense different. You're right. Where do you think the politicians sit on this?
Our Minister for Health has said a number of times.
He's been in place for quite a long time, hasn't he?
Just over a year.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking
Quite a long time.
It's a long time. I'm thinking about the Premier Football team. But yeah, well, our guy's been in for a long time. So is it your Prime Minister who is?
Yeah, so Taoiseach was
The
the Minister for Health.
That's right. That's what I'm
Now
thinking.
we have, as of.
Yeah. Do you think that helps? He was a Minister for Health.
He's only new into there, but at least we have a minister who understands, Taoiseach who understands the healthcare system and the need to invest, and has already in one of his first speeches talked about the need for information and data in healthcare and in the other departments he's worked in previously as well. So there's a clear understanding. Our minister though stands up and says that digital should no longer be an option. It shouldn't be nice to have in healthcare. And there is a direct quote.
But they
from
all
him.
say that.
Yeah,
We
they do, but
were going to go paperless, I think. Now we're still writing notes about going paperless.
On paper.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think with our minister now though, there's a will and a relationship.
Well, where will the opposition come from?
Well, so far we haven't seen opposition politically, other than for the spending of the money. The money, as you said, is a big price tag, and there are many other things that call on that money. The prioritisation of that money needs to be thought through very carefully for any country. But it's over a longer period of time, as I said, joking apart, €17 per person to modernise the healthcare system. To me, seems full. You're right, I wouldn't want to go and knock on every door in Ireland and ask for €17 from each person, but it does seem more of an affordable metric.
What's Plan B?
The plan B is to keep moving forward with the funding, with the resources we have, keep delivering the lighthouse projects, the epilepsy stuff, the haemophilia stuff, to keep building integration. We won't have an electronic health record via Plan B. We'll have an IHI, we have already the e-referrals, we'll be able to integrate and move information around that, and slowly but surely we'll have systems that do what they need to do. The maternity hospitals of Ireland will all be digital in 3 years. A single lab system will exist across the whole of Ireland. An A&E system will be there that's digital. But these will all be separately managed programs of work that require an awful lot of effort to integrate. If we have an EHR, then that becomes the bedrock to hang everything else on.
Is it that way round, or is it the other way round? The electronic health record, okay. Someone comes in to A&E unconscious, but you know who they are, you can then look up who they are. But, for so long, really, A&E staff have practiced medicine defensively. Nobody gets penicillin because some people are allergic to penicillin, or all of that. They kind of factor in all that in defensive medicine. And, elderly lady comorbidity comes in, blood test sorts out the fact that, what she's on. I mean, and if you could speak, you take a history. I mean, is it, given there's so much more money, there's so many more things we need to spend a small amount of money on, is it really as important?
You talked earlier about buying holidays, doing your banking, and that information that's there. Would you, the customer of those things, be happy if those solutions didn't exist anymore? I think there's
well, I know, but that's because they don't exist anymore. I mean, I can remember the days looking around the audience, no one here as old as I am, but where you used to go to the bank at lunchtime with a cheque,
which is better.
And you'd stand in the queue and you'd have a nice chat with a really nice lady. But you stand in the queue for a long time because all the tellers weren't there because they were at lunch. And you don't expect people to work at lunchtime. So the whole thing never happened. And now we stand in the pouring rain and in front of a machine that someone's been sick over the night before. So this is so much more convenient. I just love it. No, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's. I don't think there's a parallel in what you're saying. What I am saying is, as good as it and nice as it would be to have your health record, we've gone so long without having it and managed to look after people safely without it. Do we really need to spend all that money?
Can we continue to deliver healthcare at the escalating price of delivering healthcare without the information? I don't think we can.
Well, why? I mean, tell me how it
As more and more people come into hospital, comorbidities, as you said, we need to know everybody will have a rare disease because of the different things that are wrong with them. Every disease becomes a rare disease. We need to understand the things that are wrong with them. To be able to make use of things like genomic sequencing in the future to give people contextualized care, we need that information.
We've just had this genomic sequencing thing. Somebody or other in the NHS in England was talking rubbish this morning on the wireless about this genome sequencing and how we're all going to have our own fingerprints. So if we get cancer, we're all going to get special tailor-made drugs. Oh, really? You know, how do you do clinical trials? Who's going to dispense them? Who's going to make them? Who's going to pay for them? It's cuckoo, that.
But you talked to the banking sector 30 years ago about ATM. People have been sat on a stage saying it's cuckoo.
There's a big difference, isn't there, between moving the thing outside. I mean, it's like the supermarkets. It's called the customer adding value to the business. So that's why we do our own checkout. You know, do you have self-checkouts here? Yeah, it's the same in England. Yeah, and it's quite interesting because I've seen in-store video where people queue up to check out themselves, and the guys at the checkout say they're doing that. Because we do it ourselves, we think it's quicker. It isn't actually. It's much quicker to let them go on the checkout. But the reason that Tesco's do it is because we're doing what they used to pay people to do. It's cheaper. So there are those benefits. But I come back to the healthcare, an electronic health record, nice to have, but vital? No.
I do genuinely believe it's the only way healthcare systems will be affordable in a decade.
But I want you to tell me why you believe that. I mean, you believe that because you're an IT one. Christ sake, if you don't believe it, nobody will. But what is the justification of that? People like Michael, who used to come to work with Florence Nightingale, he practiced perfectly safely without all this electronic palaver. And I'm wondering if we actually do it because we can, or do it because we need to. I mean, I get the IT stuff that you do. I get the business with the barcode, and all of that. It's cheap, easy to do. Everybody should be doing it. But I'm not so sure about this electronic health record.
I guess what we do when we talk about an EHR, we do swallow up that barcode of patient, barcode the result, barcode the samples that have been taken, barcode the drugs that have gone in, make it easier to avoid making mistakes.
No, I absolutely get that. I mean, when the nurse is on the ward and she does the things, the thing they put on your crocodile clip, they put on your finger, the temperature and your blood pressure and all that. I don't know how it happens here, but what happens is the nurse writes it down on a piece of paper and then she puts it into the machine.
So if you take one of our
You've got the Wyvern machines, you've got those here, they can be Bluetoothed into the PAS system, but they seldom are because no one can afford to do it.
But if you take maternity hospital that went live in December, before it went live, there was a clipboard at the end of every cart, and the nurse went up every 20 minutes to check outputs of the patient every 20 minutes, write them down on a graph and leave them there for people to come back around.
We could all see it, know it was done, great.
But now
it's like the thing in the laboratory, isn't it? If this laboratory was clean, you take it off and then there's a gap, you bring up the boss and say the car is a tip. It's great. A piece of paper is a good idea, but if you've got against paper.
If it was connected dynamically, if it's in there so that the nurse can see a number of patients at the same time and see when things are going on, and if you think about the test results of the drugs being prescribed and see the interactions that are happening in real time, that genuinely way, you talk about
more
saving
nurses and
lives,
training better,
which is more affordable. The amount of nurses
I'm not so sure. Investment in people strikes me as I'm not. No, I mean, I know I'm pulling your leg, but I mean, well, actually, no, I'm not. The more I'm arguing the case, the more convinced I am. I know, £1 billion for what? You're having a laugh. And there's so much more we can do with £1 billion.
Yeah.
And it certainly wouldn't be genome sequencing, whatever it is.
We've got to be careful because when we talk about an EHR, the stuff you just talked about, the barcode scanning, the identification, that's part of it. When we talk about an EHR program, they're all part of that. It's a digital modernisation of the healthcare system. It's not just the traditional health record piece that the UK would be used to. There isn't any digital infrastructure of that nature in Ireland except in pockets of excellence. And I think that's the big difference here is this has moved from almost completely paper to move to a paper light, to move to an ability to have dynamic results into information, to give nurses and doctors tools to do a job in 2017, not tools to do a job in 2017.
I understand why you're an evangelist for it, because why I get that. But if you look at the UK experience, we were going to go paperless by 20, what was it? Something 2017,
18.
wasn't it? 2018.
The national programme was 14.
We started off at 14, then it went to 18, and then it was patient-facing things would be paperless. I mean, we just found it too difficult to do.
And there isn't a go paperless, that isn't what we're striving to do.
Well, you're on the aren't you?
That isn't the goal.
You can't have an electronic health record and a bit of paper.
But we haven't set about
It's like
saying
the
this
bog
is
thing.
about going paperless. That isn't the parameters we've set. It's a very different setup. I think one of the CCIOs in the UK recently said, health is the only business in the world that doesn't collect the digital identity of its customers. We don't communicate with patients digitally. And yet back to your bank, your holiday, is it more useful for you to get an email, a message from your bank to your phone, and would you like that securely and carefully considered from your clinician?
Well, what is my clinician going to tell me?
If you're giving them some information about the exercise you've done, that you're prescribed, the drugs you've taken and their interactions, your temperature, any manner of different things you could be giving to your clinician, and therefore they could be advising you as you go along.
Do you think they want to know that on top of all the other stuff they have to do?
I think in some cases.
These people with these Fitbit things, and think, I've walked 3,000 steps today. I don't give a shit. Why would anybody care?
But if somebody's been told to do exercise for health reasons, and now they've got a way of knowing how far they've walked and whether they've met what they were asked.
That's a different thing, but my GP is not going to be very happy if I send him an email and say, guess what, Jeff, I've done 3,000 steps today. He said, thanks, don't send me any more emails.
But you might be interested to know how you felt while you were doing that.
Tired.
But you can imagine one of the things we talked about was around mental health and bipolar disorder in particular. A patient goes back to see their clinician every 3 months who has bipolar disorder. They spend the first 20 minutes trying to remember how they felt for the last 3 months. If they can communicate or at least collect the information digitally through that 3 months, then when they sit down with their clinician going, actually, this is what I felt like over the last 3 months, the care that then can be delivered is fundamentally different. Clinicians in Ireland have said recently that an outpatient appointment is like a date, a first date, every single time that they meet patients. They're asking them, how old are you, where are you from, what's your name, where do you come from, type thing. And that's not
So just
good.
look at the GP letter that you see in front of you. Read the letter, you know what happened.
But it's a letter again, isn't it? Is it there? Is it on time? Is it got the right information? Can you really justify that it is the letter of my GP says
I tell you
Corbridge
what,
on the same one?
I tell you what I do think, and it's outpatient appointments. What a complete numpty waste of time most of those are. When you can do it on FaceTime, are you going to do that?
FaceTime might be taking it too far straight away to lobby into
What's wrong with FaceTime?
There's an element of video consultations that's been explored.
But it's all this, why is it okay to do it on Skype and not do it on FaceTime?
No, I wasn't suggesting it was okay to do it on Skype either. I'm just saying generally you need to be careful about the platform that you're going to support and use to do that. How do you manage security? How do you manage? Because you wouldn't want to accidentally be telling somebody else the things that you're telling.
I mean, I use FaceTime all the time and no one's ever eavesdropped on what I've said. I mean, why? I think, are we being overcautious about this?
I think if a patient opts into doing it, then maybe that's the way to go.
That's the point I'm coming to. If I say it's okay to talk to my dog on FaceTime, why don't we do it?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point and something that I'd be keen to look at myself as well. But
It's a lot cheaper than spend your £1 billion.
Certainly, there are a number of primary care solutions now that have been looked at for video consultations across Ireland. 3 different organisations are looking at how they can do that, and very different commercial models have been able to do that from a GP point of view. So,
But it's free. I mean, all this. I mean, most clinicians have got an iPhone, and most patients, and the
the
ones that.
commercial model in Ireland will be more about the care and the amount of time the patient is with the GP as opposed to.
No, I'm not talking about. I mean, I think the GP is a separate thing. We'll get to it in a minute. But I mean, I think outpatients, follow up after treatment and all that kind of thing. Where, I had it myself. I had a kidney stone, which is much more painful than childbirth. You would know, having experienced both, witnessed one and done the other. And I remember I got a letter from my local hospital, and they said, "Dear Mr. Lilly, we've made an outpatient appointment on the 13th of May, or whatever it was, at 3 o'clock." So I rang them up and said, "I'm really sorry, I can't do it, because I'm busy." And they boy, I should have thought you paid more attention to your health. That was the answer. Exactly. So we had a bit of a row, and I said I wanted to do it. So I said, "Come on," I got my diary, and she said, "No, we'll write to you, that's the way we do it." So I'm going down the track, really. and then they sent me another appointment. I couldn't do that either, and she said, "It's you again." So we had another row, and in the end I gave up, and I went to the outpatients appointment. 28 quid in the car park, half a day, fiddling about, sitting next to people with diseases and coughs. It's horrible. And then I walked into saw the surgeon. He said, "Hi Roy, how are you?" I said, "Fine." Any trouble? He said, "No, with the pathologist might take so much." That was it.
And if that was done digitally and you accepted that, there's an outpoint patient.
That's the point. Now, it doesn't suit everybody, but there's no silver bullet, the silver buckshot. So if we did it for the people who wanted to do it, it gives us more headroom for the people who don't or can't. So that seems to be a much more sensible use of public money than fiddling about the PR or what.
We come back to that breadth of the EHR business cases about digitising the healthcare system. So things like that are absolutely.
But do we need this great digitisation thing, or do we not just say to a clinician, "It will give you an iPhone, so or an iPad, so you can do FaceTime"? We'll have a clinic for iPad or whatever, chain it to the wall in case somebody floats it on eBay. What they like. And you can, you say to me, "Mr. Lilly, you're due an outpatient appointment. Do you want to do it on FaceTime?" I say yes. It's so simple.
Yeah.
But why do you complicate all this with great procurement and fandango and palaver? It's a lot easier than you
think. There has to be
you're
standardised.
You're big, deep trouble. You're starting with a blank sheet of paper, and you're going to complicate it.
So I
charge £1 billion.
I wonder if there's a standardise a healthcare system. So when we talk about delivering care, we practice healthcare.
Why standardise it?
Because a patient needs to have the same access to information. A clinician needs to have the same capability and the same understanding. And
It's called FaceTime.
I'm absolutely for the ability to use solutions that exist to have that communication, particularly where, like I say, a patient opts into that. But I think there's 2 or 3 parts to that. Not everybody's got access to FaceTime. So what do you do for people that haven't?
Then you do. If they can't do it, they have to get on the bus and go to the hospital like they do now.
It's not a particularly equitable solution.
Well,
for
why does it need to be
system.
equitable? Them as God's phone can do it. Them as can't get on the bus. That's life, isn't it? What has equity got to do with it?
I think it absolutely has to be a big part. We're looking at a national healthcare system that looks after over 4 million people that live in Ireland. You can't say you have to have an iPhone.
No, you don't. You just say, if you've got an iPhone, we can make life a bit more convenient for you, and you can save us time and trouble.
Okay. Got Apple shares.
If you haven't, then we'll deal with you in the normal way. And if I'm a little old lady and I don't have, maybe my daughter does. This equity thing. I'm all for. I get equity, but we can't wait to move on until the last person in Ireland buys an iPhone.
Definitely can't. But I think that it's the options, it's the
Whilst you're knocking on doors looking for your 17.
They start having their iPhones.
It does make a nonsense of it, doesn't it?
I don't think it does. I think it is a national healthcare system that needs national solutions to national problems.
I think it needs sane solutions. Now let's think about the management of long-term conditions. What are you going to do about that?
I dare almost say some of it now. So when you talk about you start talking about information and having information.
I'm just warming up.
I'm getting scared. When you talk about information for long-term conditions, it's what drives the treatment of long-term conditions. If you look at the care of epilepsy, haemophilia, bipolar disorder in Ireland, by having information, by giving patients access
real
to
high
information.
end. Let's not go there because that's real high end, and I know you've dealt with that. What about the, I don't know how many people there's in Ireland with diabetes?
The principles are the same principles. If we can give people with diabetes access to their information and the ability to update their information to securely, as you've just said, speak to their
No,
clinician.
that's just keeping records. What I'm
That's
talking about is, you know, on my Apple iPhone, I go to Medica every year. Do you know about Medica? Okay. Let's start right at the beginning with this boy. Right, Medica. Has anybody been to Medica? Yeah, Shane's been to Medica. Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Tell us about Medica.
This event in Dusseldorf.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty astounding in terms of really everything. I suppose it's like CBIT for health IT and health information.
It's everything. They've got everything from helicopters, ambulances there to stents. I mean, it is fantastic. And they have a big healthcare pavilion there, which you really ought to go to. Take a week's leave, pay for yourself, and go, and have a look. And they've got, well, you've probably seen it yourself. I mean, you can manage most long-term conditions with an iPhone now. With stuff you plug in. And I'm not going to say that other technologies are available because the Samsung sucks. But no, seriously, there's a lot of kit you can stick in tablets and all of that now. So you can make people manage. See, when we were talking earlier about the customer adding value to the business, being the checkout person for Tesco's and not getting paid for it. If you think about diabetes, why I picked up diabetes, we think about diabetes. If somebody's diagnosed with diabetes, we say, I'm very sorry to tell you you've got diabetes, and then we love them. We give them everything we've got. Every service you can possibly think of, we give them. What about we say, you've got diabetes, I'm sorry about it, but it's your diabetes, and you've got to look after it. We'll show you how, but you've got to do it. Now, you can manage diabetes on an iPhone with a blood spot analysis thing. You do your test and you send it in. Now, here's the problem. Hang on. Here's the problem. So you do that. Where do you send it?
And I guess that's the point back to, infrastructure.
Well, it's your job, isn't it?
But that's the
well,
point,
what are you
isn't it?
doing
So
about it?
if we need that information to be collected,
Bugger
we
about
need
it.
a health record to be able to put that information.
No, it's not a health record.
Well,
is
you
it?
need to capture what was yesterday, what was today, and what's
Yeah,
tomorrow.
so how about we say we send it out, we send it to a call centre. We don't send it to a GP. Once you've been diagnosed with your diabetes, that's the end of your relationship
So how about
with
you
your
don't
GP.
send it to a call centre, you put it into the record yourself?
Well, because somebody's got to make sure that the test is okay.
But as
So
a
you-
patient who's trained to do that test,
Well,
put
it's
that
a lot
machine-
easier if you just shove it into an algorithm, and if it flags up that you're over whatever it is as a diabetic, I don't know what it is, then somebody has to look at that and says, oh, and brings me up and says, Roy, you're out of whack. And I say, yeah, I was at the match last night, I drank 18 pints and had a ruby. And they say, well, take care of yourself. Or I might say, yeah, I've had flu-like symptoms for a week and I don't feel very well. They say, well, go and see the diabetes nurse. But that's got to be done at a call centre. You can only do that at scale. And that requires a different kind of investment.
But so much of the digital infrastructure can do so much of that. So if you're a diabetes patient and you're putting that information in data, you don't need a call centre to look at that data. Because the digital solution can look at that and do the algorithms you just spoke about and flag the ones that need a clinician. As a diabetes patient,
Are you going to do that?
It's an electronic health record outcome. Is to
When
be able
are you
to
going to do that?
It's not in the business case as the first things to do.
Oh, how disappointing.
But then when you look at the epilepsy, bipolar, haemophilia, maternity, the lessons learned from that do.
I think a lot more people are likely to be diabetic, and you could take a lot more of the heavy lifting out of the NHS by that kind of approach. I just don't know why we don't start with the simple things that we can do and do the simple, straightforward.
I think that's what we've done. I think in those three areas in particular, we've looked at the simplest way of investing small, in the grand scheme of things, small amounts of money to give us a platform to change the way care is delivered. And I think that's been fundamental to the lessons the team, the lessons the vendors we've worked with, and the lessons patients and clinicians have learned. We have patients now with epilepsy who have had the genome sequence, granted all the stuff that you said earlier, but had the genome sequence, the geneticist's opinion applied to their health record, given to the patient so they can understand it, but now the geneticist part of the multidisciplinary team. We've had patients who've had epilepsy their entire life come off drugs. We've had patients who've had an epileptic seizure every day have days without an
No
epileptic
one
seizure.
could say that that is not a fantastic exemplar. It is fabulous, and we should be sharing all that kind of stuff. No one can say that. But when you consider the challenges that there are, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but when you consider the challenges that there are in the future for healthcare, and the extent to which innovative use of the management of information by the use of technology can contribute to the heavy lifting, I think all we can say is that, you know, we're very pleased for the people with epilepsy who are on that program. Good luck to them. But we've got a lot more. Well, I didn't want to use that expression, but yeah, I mean, it's a drop in the ocean.
And the reason for that, though, is until there's an agreement to spend money to move forward diabetes and other larger cohort long-term conditions, illnesses, then we have to focus on
it's long-term conditions that will drag healthcare systems to their knees.
The haemophilia solution has saved 25 million in 3 years.
Yeah, I'm not saying it didn't, but if you had a diabetes solution, how much would that save? You know, so I get you've got to start somewhere, and I'm not being in any sense critical. But what I am, trying to make the point is that if we're going to use technology, we need to use it, I think, in the areas where we're going to get the biggest return on investment, and in certainly long-term conditions. We can't carry on the way we are. I don't know what it's like here, but I think I'm right in saying we've got 800,000 diabetics or something horrible in no, it's more than that. It's 3.4 million. Isn't it? I'm thinking about dementia. It's 3. So it's 3.4 million, isn't it, diabetics? You know, if you can do something that's going to take the pressure off, I don't know, 30%, then you make a huge and enduring.
But it's the affordability of doing that. You know, the reason we picked those 3 illness areas was, unfortunately, based on the budget we had to spend on solutions in there. We knew
your target is spending where you can. I get that. Right. Well, let's have a few thoughts and questions then. Who would like? Yes.
Just wondering, Roy.
Would you tell us who you are? And hang on a minute. My assistant will come. Because we just want to get you.
I know I'm Fergal. I work with Richard on the electronic health record program.
So are you one of the 288?
Yes. Yeah.
They're not all 200. You know. Is there anybody here that's got a proper job?
Not as good as yours. So
I retired in 1989. Right, go on. Fergal. So you're Fergal, are you?
Yes.
Oh,
so
right. Are you sure?
Having had experience of other industries outside healthcare, such as the postal industry in Ireland, where we had a digital post office in the early 1990s and mid 1990s, and Ireland was the first country in Europe.
Started in
Ireland was the first country in Europe to have a digital taxation system. It's not just as simple as just allowing everybody to use a mobile phone. So I'd say, let's say for you, you've compared healthcare to banking.
Do you want to ask me a question?
I'm asking you a question now.
No, I'm going to ask you a question. I asked you a question.
But you could easily have a choice of choosing, let's say, you mentioned healthcare being like travel and like banking. You could have chosen to stay with a bank that stayed with paper and no electronic systems but mobile phones, or equally a travel agency that stayed with paper or no mobile phones. So I'd just like to ask you, maybe the fullness of comparing a full sector and how it needs to change with technology. Have you done that, or have you had experience of people who've gone through a journey of making their kind of services better in the way that the health services in Ireland are planning to do?
I'm full of admiration of what it is you're trying to do, and I think my view would be that as you come relatively late to this, then there's a lot of learning that you certainly personally have, and I'm sure your colleagues do, that would enable you to be much more successful, much quicker than we've been in England, and certainly in other healthcare systems around the world. Because if you look at what's happening around the world, there are very few of them that really do make the best use of technology. I mean, right across Europe, there's some evidence in Australia, Germany, where they're good at it. It's certainly not in America where you'd think it would be. Absolutely not. And maybe a bit in Sweden, but there's not.
And then Nordics and
Yes.
Estonia stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, to be honest, no one has really cracked it. And what I'm simply saying is, what we were discussing, I think, is the extent to which we are mesmerised by the electronic health record and where it really sits in the priorities of things.
I think we're perhaps using the wrong terminology there, or the business case for the EHR is about when we talk about the 4 pillars, we talk about moving information around the systems. We're talking about patients having a portal so they can see the information. So they're 2 of the things you talked about there. You couldn't move your healthcare system to the iPhone unless the patient can actually see the information that's there, and others can see the information and they can add to that information. So maybe it's a good lesson actually. The idea of an EHR is now shrouded in negativity because of the US, because of the national program priority, etc. Maybe that's the thing we need to drop. We need to drop that name and talk about digital solutions that facilitate and enable patients to be
I
involved
think
in
you'll
healthcare.
have to come up with something snappy. There's a lady at the back. Yes, ma'am. You look like a very nice person who's going to ask something really nice.
Yes. Richard, it's a hugely challenging and difficult brief that you have. How do you sustain your own resilience and motivation and that of your team?
He goes partying in Ibiza. I thought everybody knew that.
Did he bring the 287 others?
I want to let the cat out of the bag. You've only got to look at his Facebook page. I mean, honestly, if you looked at his Facebook page, you'd never give him the job. He's totally unsuited to work like this.
Thanks, Roy.
I guess honestly, some of the pictures on your Facebook.
You know, we're all wrong.
Let me take them down first.
Oh my God, you're right.
He just goes, he gets blasted.
That's why the politicians love him.
The sustainability and the enthusiasm as well, it has to be part of the team now, and we've built up a culture where people, and I know other organisations say this, but we care so much about what we're trying to do. Back to your point about who would work in health IT. The only people who work in health IT are people that care about the vision and getting out the other end. People don't work as hard as they work in what they're doing unless they genuinely care about getting to the
Have
end.
you got the best people?
I do.
I mean, you've got to say that, but I don't know whether you do or you don't.
I genuinely feel I have 288 staff who I would consider some of the best people I've ever worked with in 20 years.
And they're all on a national pay structure.
And we're on the national pay structure.
So you can't give them a bum, company car, shares, Google.
Never say never.
Google here. Who else has got a question? Yes, sir. Hang on just a moment.
I don't know, Mike.
I think you do.
Sorry.
You certainly need a different shirt. Where's your
I'm just
really gone. Did you not bother?
No, I work in design, so we're allowed to do that.
Really?
You work
He calls that design?
I'm just wondering about because in Ireland obviously we've got a public and a private health system, so wondering how it's going to work, or what the thinking is on how that will work, and how will the private sector or the private health be brought into health records. And
Well, I imagine he'll get it all sorted out and he'll flog it to the private sector.
My job is across public, private, and voluntary sector. It isn't.
How big is the private sector?
Oh, somebody help me out.
It's 20 billion is total health economy in Ireland, and
Yeah.
5 billion of that is the private health economy.
We've got hospitals bigger than that. Yeah, sorry, yeah, go on. Yeah, it is small, isn't it? In England, it was I think it was about 9%. It's gone up to 11% now, because now our waiting times have gone up. You know, the waiting time, the private sector love waiting times, because that's when people move into the private sector. But there's no money in the private sector, is there really?
I mean, the question though, the role is to put infrastructure in across the health system.
How do you feel about that?
So the individual health identifier is a massive bonus. I mean, he refers
But they're all your doctors moonlighting anyway, aren't they? They're not. It's not a proper business, is it? It's just a load of places that
But it is
provide
all-
facilities for surgeons to work evenings and weekends.
But it is ultimately still all about the people of Ireland and the healthcare right. So they will move between the public, private, and voluntary healthcare sector in Ireland.
Isn't
And by
that a bit
having-
dangerous? You know, you're going to end up seeing somebody privately in a hospital who'll change a dressing and he'll never get charged.
The the system has to help make sure that that danger isn't there.
Right, who else? Anybody else? Yeah? Yes, Matt. Hang on a minute. We can't get you.
Hello, my name is Valerie,
Correct.
and I'm very interested in some of the comments that Roy had about long-term conditions. So I have done over many years with patients with chronic disease, and we at the moment are very concerned. So I work in rehab, very concerned about the whole concept of treatment burden, and we know now that there are some studies coming out of the US and Canada which highlight that the introduction of an electronic medical record or healthcare record can often result in the early stages, not so much in the long term, in a deterioration in patient level outcomes. So I'm just wondering, what are you guys?
Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, it's a phenomenon, partly to do with.
Is that a Fitbit watch?
It is, sir. Yes, I love it.
Right, yeah, good.
Yeah, I'm a fan. So partly to do with, I suppose, the clinician experience, and it's kind of a bit of be careful what you wish for. So
this is the antithesis of what he's been praying in aid all night.
I know.
Where does this research come from? Is it some Mickey Mouse University?
No, not at all. No, so a lot of the chronic disease self-management support. So really, it's about. I'm a big fan of going digital and supporting patients in being digital, and I love the idea of patient portals. But patients, are they ready? Are we ready in Ireland yet for this? And how are we going to support patients?
And that's why the things like Persona's work, the work that's been done to test what we do in epilepsy and maternity is so important. Because the US, when they introduced patient portals, they were paid to get patients to log into the portal. So there would be a kiosk in the front room of A&E and somebody employed to wheel the patient up to it and say log in. They never show them what to do, they never can add information, they can just view stuff. So funnily enough, the hospital's just been paid for the patient to log in. The patient may never log in again, and they can't add any information to it. What we've done is the epilepsy portal is designed by patients with epilepsy. So it's giving them what they believe they need as patients, allowing them to add information. I think this is amazing from an Ireland point of view. An epilepsy patient can record the severity, complexity, and frequency of a seizure. They can give that in real time from their phone to their clinician for next time they sit down to review with their clinician. Imagine having that information, not sitting down with an epilepsy patient and asking them to get their notepad out and trying to decipher what they wrote or remembered to write or how that was. I think we're going about it in such a different way because of those lessons.
I'd really like to come back to your question, because I think it's really interesting. What reasons do we have for the poorer outcomes?
It's the fact that patients aren't enabled, supported, facilitated enough in participating in that shared care, if you like.
So it's a system
So we
thing.
need to be very careful, not just about introducing the technology, but in how we educate, train, support.
And it's important too, isn't it, that we don't interpret that as being an unwillingness or an unpreparedness on the part of the patient. Because when we talk about these things, it is interesting because we're putting in the infrastructure for our successors. I mean, they're not going to spend £1 billion anytime soon again to unpick what you've done. So it's got to be robust. And if you think about the people coming through the healthcare system now, a lot will be baby boomers. I mean, as you get older, you need more healthcare. If we just take that as a broad principle, a lot of them coming through will be baby boomers, who will be people who do book their holidays online, that do their banking online, that are used to IT, who will say, why the hell am I going to traipse to the hospital when I can do it on FaceTime? I mean, there's a whole group of articulate people coming through that we have to be prepared for. And at the moment, everything is looked through the eyes of the little old lady who can't do anything for herself. When actually, our healthcare systems they're encumbered by that. I mean, if you look at retailing, you can segment retailing. You know that people going to Topshop are going to be a certain profile.
Yeah.
And you know that people going to Marks and Spencer's.
But I think you have to be very careful not to do that with digital.
Well, what I'm saying is that on the digital thing, people segment themselves, don't they? There will be people who are able to use technology and will demand to use it.
But I think you've got to be very careful not to suggest that's to do with age. So the biggest take of FaceTime and Skype is an elderly parent who is talking to their grandkids or children on the other side of the world.
No, it's not the biggest take up. It tails off at 55, because I looked at it.
Okay, so my mum would have never ever used technology.
My
She
mum
would use
died
technology.
last year, and she was 95, and she FaceTimed me every day.
And that's
So, I mean, old doesn't mean stupid. But,
No, that's my point.
what I'm saying is there are a whole group of people now coming through who will be in the baby boomer era who are likely to require more healthcare and will be far less forgiving of clunky systems.
And let's face it, clinicians that are coming through of the same age who are far less forgiving of pen and paper and ring
Well, I
binders
thought
the way
it
they
was,
deliver
I
healthcare.
thought it was interesting when we had the junior doctors strike in England. That was run by on WhatsApp. They set up a WhatsApp group and they ran it on WhatsApp. So I thought it was really interesting. And we just had I'll come to you in a second. We had a really interesting case just recently where some junior doctors got hauled up before the GMC, which is a completely useless organisation, for texting each other about some results for a patient. And when they said, well, why do you do it? They said, because it bloody takes ages to use the hospital's computer system. Lady in a red shrug. Hang on a minute, we'll give you the microphone.
Roy, I love the fact that you are the Jeremy Paxman of the
Not
health
at
sector.
all, absolutely. I'm just a curious bystander. I'm just curious.
So you actually just said what I was going to say, talking about junior doctors now using Snapchat groups to communicate patient information. So we talk about an inpatient population of patients, but what about the inpatient junior doctors in the I generation who are coming through, who are mobile first and a digital first generation? And I think the standardization of healthcare and electronic health records is really important because there's open source technology there that is going to be used and people are already using it. So I think the HSE and National Health Services have to step in and leapfrog. And yes, they're not earlier doctors; they're far behind. But people will bend the rules and will use other systems.
I think that's really you're so true. What you say. I mean, I'll come to you in a second when you gather your thoughts and come up with a half-good answer to a very good question. I was in a hospital just recently shadowing some junior doctors on the ward, and they did their thing with the patient, which I wasn't involved with. But then they had to go to the system on the ward where they had to put in they had to log in every time. The thing had to, you get the little whir of death, and then eventually the whole thing boots up and they get in, and then they find the results up there.
But that's
It's
making
just
the IT system
horrendous.
work right, but that's when it works wrong.
Well, IMS-MAXIMS don't do that, of course, but crap other companies do.
But I think, back to centering around clinical experience, what do clinicians need? How does that work? We're looking at recruiting clinicians in Ireland. Clinicians expect IT to support the clinical journey. And if it's not there, then will they want to come and work at that hospital, in that practice, in that community health organisation?
You are right. I mean, the number of apps and stuff that's around now, they just are overtaking what we're doing. And what we're doing, we're kind of, I guess, laying the railroad system, but they're going to be very different trains. We're putting in the Royal Scot when the Pendolino is coming. Yeah. And are you a doctor?
No, I'm not. I work in digital marketing, but I kind of write research about digital transformation.
Yes, it was a very good question. Best question of the evening. Thank you very much. Who's next? Yeah. Oh, well, now listen, this better be a good question. You can't be better than that one. It better be a good question.
I'm surprised you haven't hit it yet. Just to go back to a point that was talked about it earlier, the clinical engagement that didn't happen in the national programme. Of course, the circumstances are very different now, but it's well known that health IT projects are the sort of playing field on which clinico-managerial battles are fought. And you certainly, I know...
Clinico-managerial, is that? It's like the Greco-Roman Empire, isn't it?
Well, it was a bit. Probably still is. I know you put a huge amount of effort into getting more clinicians on board, but who's helping the junior managers, the boards, the hospitals that you want to implement? Because quite often they're as big a barrier as anything.
Yeah, they are. I think that's a really good point, Michael. I think when we look at the organisations that are in the acute hospitals, the engagement they predominantly have with management of a hospital is phenomenal around what digital can do. And this is where, back to the point earlier, in Ireland, unlike the UK during the national programme, the system is looking for IT to help it. This isn't a persuasion battle to say, give us that one because we want to replace it with this one. It's, let's get you stopping prescribing chemotherapy on carbon paper with a pencil and get you doing it with a digital solution that allows you to deliver safer, more efficient care. There are a massively talented group of people that are leading technology in each hospital across Ireland, and they take ownership of the engagement of each hospital's consideration of what a digital agenda is, way more than the UK ever was able to do in the national programme phase. I think now when you look at Andy Kinnear and Rachel Dunscombe and these people that are now doing such a phenomenal job, they also have learned from the national programme, and they're doing exactly that in the UK. They've got that level of engagement that we were never allowed to do during the national programme.
I know Andy Kinnear always watches press conferences, so say hi.
He is, yeah.
Is he watching?
Yeah.
Giving you a mention, Andy. Give us a little thumbs up. Make sure he knows he's had a mention. He's a good guy. You know, the board thing is interesting because I've spent most of my life on boards in hospitals and what have you, and I've always just sort of sat gobsmacked at the amount of papers that you get, which are board papers. No one ever reads them. You know, the absence of really useful information to really know what the hell is happening in the organisation. It would make a big difference, and given that there are a lot of non-executive directors on boards,
You're not going to fix that without just an iPhone.
But you see, you belittle the iPhone solution, you know. But I bet today there would have been how many outpatient appointments do you do in a day across the country? Does anybody know how many outpatient appointments? Does anybody here work for the NHS here? No? Okay. Well, you know what I mean. Well, I mean, let's say, I don't know, would there have been 5,000 outpatient appointments?
More than 25,000.
25,000 outpatient appointments. Let's say there were that today. And let's say a third of them could have been done actually on FaceTime. How much would that have saved you? You see, there's no such thing as a big thing. All the big things are made up of little things. You build a cathedral, a brick at a time. Yes.
Question?
Yeah. This gentleman came late. Do you have a note from
Yeah,
your
but
mum?
all the best people arrive late. I'm surprised you started without me.
We just hung
Some of us have to work.
Hung on.
Someone has to keep the ship going. So, yeah, I can't believe I stuck my head above the parapet. I also normally keep my head down and my arse lower, but anyway. Just speak to the last couple of points when people were talking about the kind of WhatsApp or Snapchat and other technologies are also available. Just an example of how maybe the health environment is changing for ICT. We're looking and working with a group of hospitals. So traditionally our approach would have been...
Who's we?
St. Vincent's Hospital, sorry. Traditionally what we would have done with our medics is say, just don't use them. There's a policy in the hospital and the policy is don't use these kind of technologies, and if you do, you know, there'll be consequences. Well, maybe not that far, but close enough.
Yeah.
So
we have policies like that.
Yeah, and people ignore them, and they take the path of least resistance, and they do what your colleagues did in the UK in terms of, you know, contacting each other and organising things through that. So you can either bury yourself head in the sand and just hope nothing happens, or you can try and do something about it. So our medics worked with us, and they said, look, we need to look at a technology that is safe for our clinicians to use, but that has all of the functionality that they want from these types of apps. So we started working on that with our colleagues in the HSE. Then that expanded out to a group of hospitals working together and looking at doing a business case for a national framework procurement that could get a technology that would actually meet the clinicians' needs and the needs for security, because you do have to have those clunky passwords and everything else. And that's what we're working on, but that's because the environment has changed where people feel you can actually make those things happen. You know, 5 or 6 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. Yes. People would have said, look, you know, we'll try and get something here, try and get it in, maybe even under the radar, and it's just going to be for us, and we're just going to do what we can. It's clandestine. but now there's much more collegiality. And
I'm going to stop you if I may, because we've only got the room booked till 11 o'clock.
But you know, we can always go across the road.
But it's a very interesting question. Look, but it is an interesting question, and you're right. I mean, you're right too. Really, first of all, it was clinically led. How often do we end up saying if it's clinically led? You know, it's a lot better. And secondly, what I think it does, it helps me crystallise. Probably my final question to you, really, is that you wrote your business case nearly 2 years ago now. You don't know when the funding is going to come through. Technology is overtaking us. What you were saying in your question. Are we just reinventing the past, really?
Because the business case will be reviewed against changes in technology. It can't be just accepted that something that was approved 13 months ago is still valid from a digital point of view, which is a shame. But it was reviewed extensively by clinicians, written by clinicians, for clinicians, with patients in mind, and patients part of that group. So that's when IT people do come to the fore, because they're the ones that can talk about the stuff that Dermot's just talked about, the changes, the consumerisation of IT is a big part of where we've gone. I think one of the things IT and healthcare has to be careful of, we have to say no to WhatsApp. But if we don't have anything better to give a clinician, then it's hard to say no to that. We have to make sure that people are safe with IT, but actually tying IT down so tightly that it becomes a paperweight isn't the right answer.
I don't want to get bogged down into WhatsApp, but it's encrypted and it's driving the Pentagon balmy, so why it's not good enough for healthcare, I guess I don't know.
We'll find out soon.
Sorry?
We'll find out.
We'll find out. Natalie is going to assist me.
Shane is going to.
Oh, Shane.
I'm going to do blinds.
Okay. What?
Well, I mean, if anybody hasn't been offended tonight, don't worry, you will get down to you eventually.
Is he the morale officer?
This you did this. It's in Ireland.
Can you just stop there for a minute? Because it's very noisy. Is there no one competent in this organisation? Have you enjoyed yourselves?
Yes.
Have you had a good night?
Yes.
Thank you very much. You've been a great guest, and I've been really interested in talking to you, and I think I'm a bit of a fan, actually. And I wish you luck with what you're doing. Of course, your job has been made so much easier by all the half-month lessons. We have a little tradition that we always give our guests a bottle of whiskey. Actually, now this is the best whiskey in the world. It's Penderyn whiskey. It's Welsh whiskey, and bringing it to Ireland, it was a bit of a risk, but it's Welsh whiskey. It is the best whiskey in the world. The interesting thing about it is that also that if your governance arrangements are the same as they are in England, the value of it is just above the amount that you have to declare. And it will piss everybody off. Ladies and gentlemen, what a great day.